Director of Engineering, Stephen O'Brien.
Thank you. Hey guys. So if your Facebook newsfeed looks anything like mine, it's covered with these. They're these short, snappy recipe videos. You can watch them without sound. They've got subtitles. And before your eyes, with some common ingredients you probably already have at home, comes together something relatively delicious. I'm fascinated with these things. I think it's partially because I'm a terrible chef, and they make it look so easy. I've always found following recipes to be sort of inherently stressful. That doesn't make a lot of sense because these are like guaranteed ways to make things. But for me, many of the steps in the recipe are irreversible. Even the very first thing we just looked at there, just stirring some eggs into a bowl of milk, there's no amount of science or technology in the world today that can undo even that simple operation. And so I often find myself making a mistake along the way in a recipe and then reaching this sort of familiar decision point. Do I go back to the very start, throwing away everything I've done so far, or do I carry on regardless, bravely, hoping that everything will come together? And we're sort of familiar with this dilemma in the real world. We can't go back in time. We have to be careful with the decisions we make and the actions we take. But there are some exceptions. So here's a cool video, for some definitions of cool, from a fluid mechanics lecture. And the demonstrator here is putting in 3 drops of color. He's stirring now, and we can see them combine, as we'd expect, into a sort of brown smudge. Now he starts stirring the other way around. And slowly but surely, a pretty remarkable thing happens, which is that the 3 drops of ink reappear, as if untouched. So this is a truly reversible little process we just saw. Looking at these 2 snapshots, we can't even tell which one came first in time. So I wish that recipes were more like this, or the steps in recipes, such that you could go back and forth, make mistakes, experiment. I bet it would be a lot more fun, and I think the food that I could make would be a lot better too. So I'm here today to try and sell you on this concept of reversibility. And I think in our industry of making software products, at this point in time, we have the luxury of being able to do almost everything we need to do reversibly. So let's take a look at a few examples. So as Adam introduced, I'm the Director of Engineering. I work in our growth teams in San Francisco. So reversible code is something that's near and dear to my heart. It's easy to forget, but until recently, software was literally a physical product. It was finished in factories, and it was shipped on actual ships. So the process looked something like this. We'd start with code. We'd write this maybe over a period of a year or more. We'd do some quality assurance before physically manufacturing and shipping. And the crucial point here is that these 2 final steps are irreversible. When the code's on the ship, it can't turn around. I can only imagine how stressful that would have been for large engineering teams to effectively sign off on a massive set of changes and to say that they're perfect. So luckily, we live in the future. That's no longer the case. But the factory mindset that dates to when software was physical has persisted. And the factory mindset is the need to get it right first time. It's an appealing and a dangerous concept. So today, 70% of software companies still ship at most weekly, many monthly or quarterly. And so the process has changed a little bit. We no longer physically produce things, but we still batch up a huge quantity of code, a week, a month, or a quarters of code, and release it in a big bang to our customers. There's still this irreversible step there at the end. So the way we do it at Intercom, and I think the way companies are increasingly doing this, is to continuously deploy. So now in Intercom's org, anytime an engineer makes a change, be it a bug fix, an improvement, or a brand new feature, we re-release our application. And the process is like this. The new code will arrive onto GitHub. We'll push it up to some automated tests that run in Circle CI or CodeShip. We'll deploy it using an internal system. It'll arrive on the cloud to our customers around the world. And this happens in minutes. There's no red lines here. It's a truly reversible system. If something goes wrong, we can undo, and that takes about a minute. Engineers love this. They get addicted to it. Here's a graph of the number of times we've released per day over the last couple of years. And you can see back in the early days it was just a couple times per day, and now we're doing it perhaps 100 times per day. So this is a truly continuous and reversible system. There's a huge number of tiny changes streaming in, streaming out. So reversible code and continuous deployment, they get rid of the need for that factory mindset. We no longer need to be right first time. We no longer need to always be right. We can get away with being mostly right, just so long as we can quickly change our mind and fix things. So next, let's move away from code, talk about product a bit more generally, and see how the mindset of reversibility applies there. So your product development process essentially exists to answer these two questions. Number one, what should we build? And number two, how should we build it? There's so much art to this first one, I don't want to undermine it, but effectively you want to go from your company's mission through your team's strategy and work out what the list of problems you should even try and solve are. And so we had an interesting issue related to this on our growth teams at Intercom recently. First of all, I'm going to back up to the initial incarnation of our team. We had Ben there, our head of growth, whose job it was to conceive strategy and problems that our team would work on. And then you had myself, Patrick, and Hong Yuan, engineers and a designer who would collaborate on solutions. And crucially, we had all of our process there in that middle step, the solution phase. We had an irreversible step here, but we didn't really realize it. We were a tiny, tight-knit team. Fast forward about a year and a half, our team's grown loads. We've added about 20 people. We've now got other folks whose job it is to care about strategy and about problems, PMs, other leaders. We still only had process in that solution phase. And so what happened to us increasingly was that we'd be debating or critiquing a solution like a design, and we'd realize, oh no, we're solving the wrong problem here. And it's a bit like that moment in the recipe when you make the mistake. You're faced with that choice. Do we go back to the start and abandon our work so far? In this case, it's code and design. Or do we press on and hope that this mistake won't cause a problem down the line? And in a few cases, we had to abandon work we'd done, which is demoralizing and stressful for the whole team. So we had to make this process reversible. It just took a little tweak. We unbundled the problem stage. We added a few feedback cycles there, such that we could propose a problem that wasn't quite right, find out early, and go backwards. This has made things more fun, and it's had a pretty big impact in just a couple of short months that we've had it in place. So to the second point about product process, how do we build the damn thing? I think we can consider a feature as being a sort of stack of concerns like this, starting with concept at the bottom, working through design, and then systems and the UI that we need to implement for it to work. The tempting way to work through this pile is from the bottom up. Build the base of the pyramid and iron out your concept. Generate some pixel-perfect designs and throw them over the wall to engineering. The problem is, again, each of those little steps are themselves irreversible at times. So you might find out when you're instrumenting or building your UI that you've got some of your core design principles wrong and you need to go backwards and again throw out that work. So we prefer and we'd recommend that you scope off instead a complete holistic slice that cuts through all of these concerns. And ideally it's something, it's the smallest set of changes that you could release on their own to customers. Perhaps it's a beta version of a feature or a version of a feature which works in a restricted set of use cases. My favorite explanation of the point is this. It's from a blog post that Des, one of our founders, wrote. Perhaps some of you have seen this. So in this hypothetical example, we want to make a wedding cake. The traditional approach, the bottom-up, literally approach here, is to start with a cake base, make our filling afterwards, and eventually ice the whole thing. Again, those steps are irreversible, and we might find out at the very end that because this is our first ever cake, it just doesn't taste good. We have to start over. So instead, we start with a cupcake. It's the smallest, holistic version of what a cake could be. It's something we can taste when it's done, and it exercises our whole kitchen. So we always try and start with a cupcake in Intercom. You hear people in all sorts of teams in the company saying those words. How can we cupcake this? Meaning, how can we get a small representation of this out into the world to test our assumptions? And sometimes you realize that little cupcake was all you needed. Sometimes it does the job for 95% of cases. And even when that's not true, you learn a whole lot from it. So that's it. My advice to you is to look at your working processes and have a think about where the irreversible steps are. The big splashes, the loud bangs. Think to yourselves, is it possible to make it reversible? I think in many cases you can, and it will lead to happier people and to better results. Finally, though, it's a rule of thumb. We choose to break this sometimes in Intercom. For example, when we market major new features, recently smart campaigns. We deliberately choose the stress of a timed launch, of PR, marketing, and brand all working together because there's benefits to marketing and to customer education there. So like all things, just be conscious of the trade-off and deliberate about it. Thanks so much.